You next. Yeah.
So you've covered mafia, you've covered terrorism, you're about to cover piracy.
Right.
What next?
What about the four? So there's the four horsemen of the Infocalypse is something that we talk about in civil liberties circles. It's the four universal excuses for any confiscation of liberty on the internet. It's terrorists, the mafia, pirates, and pornographers. Right? If you just sort of cite one of those as your reason for censorship or for some other abridgment of freedom, everyone will just go, their minds shut down. It's like, oh, well, if you're fighting terrorists, of course, it doesn't matter what measure you're taking or whether it actually will ever do anything about terrorism. So long as that's your intention, we'll let you do anything. So I've done 3 of these now. Will I do the 4th one? Will I do pornography? Will I do a book about sympathetic pornographers for children? If I do that book, I have not yet figured out what it would be. I had an inkling of an idea, which is that in, I think it was Pennsylvania, kids who were sexting, which is sending naked pictures of themselves to each other, have been charged with as child pornographers, where the child pornography that they allegedly produced was a picture of themselves, and were to be put on sex offender registries and thrown in jail for being child pornographers. And it does seem to me that like anytime you are willing to destroy a child in order to save them, you're kind of getting into Doctorow novel territory. I don't know that I could sustain a whole book about it. And eventually, I think what happened was the AG in Pennsylvania saw sense and went to all the DAs and said, "Stop doing this. It's dumb." Yeah.
This is kind of a 2-part question. One, your publisher lets you do the Creative Commons license and all that stuff. So I guess I read somewhere, I think one of your posts recently, you outstrip their expectations for publishers. But do they in turn that around and let some of their other authors, do they encourage them to do it? Do they take what you see and say, this is actually a good idea? Or do they just tolerate it from you?
So the question is, if my publisher is happy with what I'm doing with Creative Commons, are they pressuring their other authors to do it? Not really. I think that some other authors have asked for and gotten permission to do it, not as widely as I do, but they still have done. I mean, Peter Watts is another Tor writer who's done this, and Carl Schrader's done this too. Some others who aren't from Toronto, whose names escape me at the moment. Unless there's someone else who hasn't asked a question. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, just like getting back to the IP law issues, you spoke eloquently on copyright. Just wondering if you could kind of compare and contrast your ideas to patents, particularly software patents and business patents.
Yeah, software.
Because there is,
What about that?
you mentioned medicine. I mean, that's an area where they do cover that. They basically cover facts and ideas rather than expression.
So patents again have this like totally even more explicitly utilitarian objective, right? Which is if we give people patents, they will disclose their methods and they will make more investment. I think that there are fields in which that's just materially not true. Like you can point to examples of people like software, right, where there's not really any indication that the investment that is put into software is increased because of patents. In fact, it seems like just the opposite. Like where patents exist in startups, because most startups fail, those patents are usually kind of raffled off by the venture capitalists. And then they go to companies that don't make anything except lawsuits. And those companies go around and sue companies that make stuff just to extort a fraction, like to just drag on their market, extort a fraction of their revenue or their venture capital to get them as just a kind of giant protection racket. This combined with the fact that the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office really doesn't seem to actually inspect the patents they grant. Their attitude seems to be grant them all, let the courts sort them out. Seems to have created a marketplace in which people who have lots of money can defend a patent and people who don't can't. And so I think that again, like a look at which areas of science and of technology and of invention would be underinvested in without exclusive rights, and giving those ones exclusive rights and reviewing that periodically, like having evidence-based patent policy is the right way to go. And one of the ways that you do that is by consulting experts in the field. So I don't know much about genetics, for example, but I do know that when you talk to geneticists, they say things like a lot of basic procedures that kind of underpin all genetic research are in patent, and those basic procedures end up undermining all of our ability to do any work at all. And so I think that it would be probably productive to say, do we really want to grant those patents? You know, which geneticists, which things should be patentable art and which things shouldn't be? Rather than treating it as we have with copyright, we've gradually gone from viewing these as just like utilitarian, like, okay, we'll give you this monopoly if you and because we think we'll get some more work out of you, to we're going to give you this monopoly because you deserve it. If we come back to this, we'll give you this monopoly because it's going to incentivize creativity where we don't get it right now, I think we'd be better off. Other questions? Yeah.
Someone Comes to Town is one of my favorite novels of yours, and I was just wondering, did you get a lot of strange reactions out of that book from people when you gave art to your editor and things like that? Because I've loaned it to several people and I've gotten a very wide range of reactions.
So the question is about what kind of reaction I've gotten to my novel, Someone Comes to Town, Someone Leaves Town, which is a kind of magic realist novel about wireless networks. It's about a guy whose father is a mountain, his mother is a washing machine, who moves from rural Ontario to the big city to start a wireless co-op, and is stalked by his undead brother. And do I get the reactions to it? Yeah, I guess I do. I mean, people like that book because it is pretty odd and fun. It was a lot of fun to write. It was a weird book to write. I was working on a different book that I never actually ended up finishing. And my parents came to visit me in San Francisco when I was living there, and we went out to like wine country. And we were staying in a B&B, and I had the first 10,000 words came to me, and I stayed up all night and typed them out, and then put it away. And then this other book got stuck like a year and a bit later, and I went back to it and just said, no, that's kind of cool. Maybe I'll try writing a page a day for a while, which is how I usually write. I'll write a page a day and see if I've got a book here. And I got about 80% of the way through, and then I realized the ending that I'd been working towards I hated and didn't want to write. And so I kind of moped and grumped and came up with a different ending and wrote that ending. And actually, when I wrote the last 3 or 4 paragraphs, I was at a conference. It was at Esther Dyson's PC Forum in Arizona. I'd gone to represent EFF there and do a talk. And it was like midnight, and I was finishing the book. And I'm not a night guy, I'm like a morning person. So I fell asleep typing. And I looked up. I woke up like this, and I typed another sentence after falling asleep, which I don't even remember. But it was a sentence of nonsense words, and I deleted it like really grumpily and finished the book. And then I was very jazzed because I finished the book, so I kind of turned it over and said, okay, now I need to start rewriting from page 1 to make that ending work, because I've written 80% of a book with one ending in mind, then I wrote a different one. I'm going to need to go back and cut out all the stuff that led up to the bad ending and put in new stuff that leads up to the good ending, and realize that on page 1, in that text that I'd written when I was with my parents in wine country at a B&B like 3 years before, I foreshadowed the ending that I'd just written, which was pretty cool. It's actually, that's what makes writing really fun. Before you put your hand up, let's see if there's anyone else who hasn't asked a question. Yeah?
One point.
Uh-huh.
Of course.
Thank you.
Was that like a certain making money?
Does Boing Boing make any money? Yeah, it does. It makes actually a pretty good amount. I'm feeling pretty stable as a freelancer. I've got the money from Boing Boing, I've got the money from writing, and I've got the money from everything else, speaking and consulting and stuff. And any one of them I could probably scrape by on. So it's nice to have kind of 3 legs of the stool, especially when the economy tanked. And our advertising from Boing Boing took a huge hit for a couple of months. Actually, I think about 6 months. It's back up, which is great. But we were like, what are we going to do? Now, on the other hand, Boing Boing has very few capital costs, which is one of the reasons that it makes a fair clip of money, because we don't have to spend much, right? We've got a few freelancers who we compensate well. We've got Rob Biscuits, our amazing managing editor. We have a sysadmin we pay half-time. We have a contract programmer. That's it, right? I mean, we've got practically no overheads. For the first 6 years we were around, we'd never all been in the same room together. To this day, we have like 1 meeting a year and about 4 phone calls a year. So it's pretty cool. I mean, it doesn't. The only reason we ever started putting ads on is because after about 5 or 6 years, if we finally hit the point where our bandwidth went from $50 a month, which we could pay out of pocket, to like $1,000 a month, and then we needed to figure out how to make money at it. And we have this through FM Publishing. You have a commissioned sales force, which is great because they really hustle. But it's impossible to tell a commissioned salesperson, okay, we just need like $1,000 and then stop, right? Because their income comes from commissions, right? So they keep going. So it turned out to be pretty profitable. I'm very thankful for it. Thank you for reading it.